A day after a bloodbath on Monday at the markets where the shares of the Adani Group fell as much as 25% amidst reports that the National Securities Depository Ltd had frozen the accounts of 3 foreign portfolio investors, there has been a partial recovery after a strong clarification from the company. But there continued to be pressure on these stocks even today. Now, the Adani Group, for its part, has said that the accounts of these foreign investors remain active, contrary to what has been reported. But key questions continue to be asked about the structure of the company, the nature of its investors, and allegations of opacity in its dealings. Joining us now to clarify all of this, and all of this has been reported in many places, a very special guest, Jugeshinder Singh, the Chief Financial Officer of the Adani Group. Thanks very much, Mr. Singh, for agreeing to talk and to take these questions, because there are quite a few of them. Firstly, did the Adani Group know that the NSDL site showed accounts of 3 foreign portfolios being frozen on the 31st of May? Were you aware of this at all?
This was part of a wider action that SEBI had taken all the way back in 2016. And the said FPIs, as far as we were aware, were active in the stocks, have been active for the last many years. So we sought a clarification post the news article, and we were informed that there is no such restriction, and that was related to accounts that are not used for equity trading purposes. And beyond that, it's a more question relevant for FPI, but that's what we clarified, and that's what I clarified in subsequent comments, and the group and portfolio companies have clarified subsequently via stock exchange announcement that it was patently a false report.
But were you aware that there was an element of these your foreign investors listed in the NSDL which was frozen? It may not have been relevant to the operations of the companies, but there was something associated with them which had been frozen. Were you aware of this fact on the 31st of May?
Generally speaking, yes. This has been like I said, it's been a couple of years notification. So we were generally aware, but it's not something to do with our businesses or our verticals. So we don't specifically pay. It's not an area of interest to us. Our area of our interest is how the regulators are looking at our companies that are listed on the stock exchange, and there were no such specific restrictions or regulatory notice to us. So therefore, it's not something that I can meaningfully comment on. Although, as interested parties in terms of what it can possibly do to minority interest. We want to make sure that we bat for our minority shareholders, and that up to that point we have interest, but beyond that it's a matter for those FPIs.
Okay. Now, the Economic Times says that confusion over your stocks, and I quote, underscored a deeper risk for investors in such stocks owned by opaque entities. Now, that's also a key concern which has been raised. There are allegations over a lack of transparency over the 3 Mauritius-based funds that have a huge stake in your group. So specifically, the question is Adani aware of the antecedents of its key foreign portfolios?
I think that's for again, it's a question which is for the regulatory authorities to look at. The central point that you raise, Vishnu, is the issue that you highlight out of Economic Times. I think we genuinely, as community and as business leaders, have to be careful of the words we use. That kind of tabloid commentary in a leading financial daily is not appropriate, because first thing is that a lot of our securities of the said companies, Adani Green Energy, Adani Transmission, Adani Ports, are registered as 144A Reg S securities.
Yes.
Our transparency certificates, if you look at a simple certificate of reporting, which we report every 6 months, it runs into well over 20 pages. It is one of the most comprehensive disclosure certificates of any company in the country.
Right.
I'm happy to have any one of our verticals measured against any entity listed in India, on any stock exchange in India, against transparency and disclosure.
Right. So
this is a clear via you to your audience, a clear that if somebody can say that our disclosures are even remotely different or in quality from any entity listed on the stock exchange, I will get it rectified immediately, but it won't be the case.
Got it. So therefore, when I asked you whether you are aware of the antecedents of the 3 foreign portfolio investors in question, can I say yes, entirely? I mean, you know about the background of these companies which have invested so heavily in the Adanis.
We are aware to the fact that they are investors with us. We don't specifically go and check, because it's not a KYC that we check the KYC of anybody who invests. That is done separately by a separate regulatory body. These entities have been investors in our incubation company, Adani Enterprise, way back since well before 2010. Yes. And what has happened is, Vishnu, is that since 2010, in 2015, we demerged APSEZ from AEL. So these entities got their proportion of shares. Then we demerged APL. Then we demerged Adani Transmission, Adani Green Energy, and then Adani Total Gas. So as the demergers happened, all shareholders of Adani Enterprise kept getting the proportion of shares, because these are vertical demergers. Yes. And therefore, it's not that there's new investments have come in or anything like that. It's purely that they were one-time investors who, due to the virtue of vertical demergers, continue to be investors. And other point to note here is that, like any investor said, what we want to look at is the underlying business performances. See, the central question in all of this comes that somehow there is a set of investor or entities or values. Here, the core aspect is on the performances of underlying businesses. So if you just indulge me for 1 minute, look at Adani Ports. Annual growth rate over double digits and market leader. So I would just simply say this: you take India's best IT company, India's best FMCG company, India's best bank, and you put Adani Port or Adani Green or Adani Transmission alongside them. Look at our growth rate. Look at the growth rate of market.
It's phenomenal. And you know, we'll talk about that in a little while. But I just want to get these key issues sort of sorted out, because it's also come out yesterday politically, where the Congress alleging that these 3 funds, which apparently have the same registered address in Port Louis in Mauritius, they apparently have no websites of their own. And they are demanding, in other words, the Congress is demanding that SEBI and NSDL come out with a complete disclosure about the nature of these funds and the ultimate beneficial ownership of these funds, and the findings of the inquiry. They need to be made public, etc., etc. So do these 3 Adani portfolios actually share the same Mauritius address? It goes back to that same question. Do you know about the antecedents of these companies?
No, we know the investors, and we have the same public information as that Congress has. And for us, any regulator can look at this. You know, we are not the regulators. The regulators can look at it. We have no problems. And incidentally, just on the Congress point, you know, Vishnu, we operate our portfolio, our verticals operate across just over 330 locations in the country. And you'll be surprised to know that our biggest and single largest exposure by value and business is in Rajasthan.
Right.
And Rajasthan, as we don't have to tell viewers, Rajasthan is a Congress-led government. So we have our biggest business is in Congress state. Our second biggest business
questions. So I'm not sure there's anything wrong with them asking questions.
Exactly. So it's not like, you know,
I don't think they would stop asking questions because of your investment in Rajasthan.
No, absolutely. But I think they should ask, they should question. And the question is that, you know, we operate everywhere. So the regulator should question, not, you know, we are not the regulators.
Okay. Fair enough. So that brings me to my, you know, and you've partly answered this question. Should SEBI and NSDL disclose the nature of these funds? Would you welcome NSDL, for example, coming out with more on this since it's been raised?
Yeah, the regulator should do what regulators have to do for market transparency. We are all for market transparency, 100%.
Now, CNBC says that earlier these accounts of Cresta Fund, Albula Fund and APMS had been frozen on account of non-compliance with SEBI norms. Have these funds followed the beneficial ownership criteria under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act? Because that requires these FPIs to submit details. For example, I'm told personal information of key employees, disclosure of common ownership. So while, this all remains active and that's been clear, were these details not shared earlier, which resulted in that block, which you mentioned took place a few years back?
Vishnu, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of the operations of these FPRs at all, and they're dealing with the regulators. And it's just, so anything that I comment will be commenting outside my remit. What I can confirm to you is that for us, the transparency, disclosure, and reporting in a timely manner that we are required to report under regulation, or we are required to report under our own governance standards, we do. Beyond that, I can't really comment on how the FPIs deal with the regulator based on the rules and regulations that they are supposed to comply with. It's a question is valid for them rather than for me.
I understand that, but it is important, isn't it? Again, in the name of transparency, these are groups with a huge exposure in the Adani companies. They contribute a great deal to your companies, the value of the companies. Therefore, would you not want them to be absolutely clean as far as following SEBI guidelines are concerned?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
And so that's not even a question. I mean, we of course welcome anything which will improve the transparency of the market.
Okay. Now the ET quotes Hemindra Hazari, who is an independent research analyst in Mumbai, who says, and I quote, "The names of the funds are not very well known in the capital market, and they have a high concentration in a select number of stocks, which in itself is unusual. Also, again, and I quote, such concentrated positions along with negligible onshore ownership create an asymmetric risk reward as large investors conspicuously avoid Adani." Now, this is from the Bloomberg intelligence analyst. This is what they've said. So, my question is a high concentration of foreign portfolio investors into very select stocks unusual?
No, I think whoever is writing this, I don't know the journalist or the researcher. They've never obviously have heard of Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway is $270 billion portfolio concentrated in 5 stocks. And I think these kind of desktop-ish analysis ignore one of the world's leading investors who is concentrated in 5 stocks of 270 billion. Concentration, as Warren Buffett has said, concentration, if you know what is good, you stick to it. But putting that aside, to say that we do not have, Adani Total Gas, we are 37.4%. Strategic investor Total is 37.4%. Funds like BlackRock, etc., are another 4 or 5%. So 42% of that stock is held by strategic and global brand names.
Okay.
So this is again a patently, just a basic research for 30 seconds will prove this wrong. This kind of commentary. Then if you look at Adani Green Energy, 24.4% approximately of the stock is held by strategic and global funds, which includes Total, includes BlackRock, includes California Shipping, and Adani Transmission is moving towards that. It's now currently 2.4% held by the global funds. So it will keep rising, and because these are young companies, 2 to 3 year old companies. Once we are also 5-10-year-old company, these will keep rising. APSEZ again, widely held. It is our oldest company, is widely held. All of that will follow the pattern. Now we are expected to somehow instantaneously behave as if we are a 10, 30, 40-year-old company. Our group is 25, a young group. We are growing fast. We grow fast. That's fine. But we also have a unique situation where we ourselves, the family, we ourselves are long-term intergenerational investor. So right. We will always have concentration because we ourselves are not seller of our equity. So we are investing for intergenerational wealth creation in the core sectors of India. So for us, that will always be the case, that we will always have 1 or 2 or 3 key investors who will be big part of our register, but it will diversify like Adani Ports have diversified.
Okay. Now the Ken says, quoting an unnamed analyst, and I quote, "There is not a single well-known domestic institution with a large stake in many of these stocks." How would you respond to that?
That's an interesting question. It's one of the things that we look at it. Firstly, it's broadly not in a very simple way. The shares are rising in these companies. That statement itself is false. The second aspect of this is that India itself, Vishnu, does not have a utilities index. We are a utility platform. So the question, more important question is, we ourselves are not utility players. So actually, this is such a moot point and is close to our hearts, those who value India and India's growth and India's development. Think of it this way. We at Adani own the core infrastructure of India, just around 65 to 70% of the core infrastructure. What would be the ideal situation? Indian pension funds owning Indian infrastructure or foreign funds owning? In our case, foreign infra funds and foreign strategic investors hold Indian infrastructure. Our preference as Indian homegrown, purely domestic infra and real asset platform, world's top 10 real asset platform, our core focus is the participation of Indian investors in Indian infrastructure. Okay. And that is it's a blight on overall that core Indian investor set. Pensioners and long-term investors are missing on long-term assets, right. And foreign investors are looking at the long-term assets in India and investing in India.
And is that problematic for you, that there isn't a well-known domestic institution with a large stake in many of these stocks?
No, that's not in that doesn't bother us at all. We ourselves are a large investor, so a specific institution doesn't add any credibility to anything at all. What's important for us is a diversified register, which we have delivered on APSEZ, and we will deliver on all of our other companies as those companies mature, without a doubt.
Just a few more questions now. From aggressively scaling up your presence in ports and airports, do you see city gas distribution as being perhaps core to your success in India? For example, you've reportedly bagged licenses for nearly 1/5 of 136 geographical areas, and I'm told going forward you'd be bidding for many more. Is this the future of Adani? I know your other businesses, but I'm asking specifically about city gas distribution.
City gas would be a very important element because it's a B2C element, and also it is integral to longer term environmental transition from liquid fuels to piped gas, and from cylinders to piped gas, which is environmentally friendly, and it plays into the health as well of smaller and regional and C category towns. So we are very much focused in this area. It is one of the key growth areas for us, and it makes India future ready for renewable and sustainable sources of power and energy.
One final question, and I think we've got general viewers watching this who have heard about the stratospheric rise of Adani stocks and the companies themselves. What accounts for this incredible rise of Adani stocks in a pandemic year?
Two things. Number one, the vision and the strategic execution capability of our vertical leaderships and the underlying growth in the businesses. For example, our port businesses are growing at double digit. Our transmission business is growing at double digits. Our green business actually is growing at multiple. It has grown 50x in size. Our Adani gas business, as you just mentioned, Adani Total Gas, is growing at well over double-digit rates. And second element in this growth and business, because the businesses are growing fast, is that we are the only infra and real asset platform. And this goes back to your transparency question as well, which is credit rating. Credit quality is same as the government of India.
Yes.
And that is global, huh? So global transparency standard says that Adani infra platform, APSEZ in transport, transmission, Adani Green, and soon other companies are same credit quality as government of India. And that goes to the heart of the transparency question. If we were not transparent, no question. We are, in that sense, one of the most transparent, well-disclosed group out there for global investors. Now, if for buyers, for other purposes, the domestic set is in a certain way, it's okay. It's our obligation to inform, our obligation to disclose, my obligation, team's obligation, everyone's obligation. We will do that, and we will deliver a well-diversified, high-performing, world's top infra and real asset platform, which we are already in top 10, and we will be a world-class infra and real asset platform. First time in Indian business history that an infra platform has risen from India to the top 10 in the world. And we are proud of it. We are proud of our teams, and we will continue to do that. And that also spells good news for Indian GDP, because we are Indian GDP story. We don't export, we don't do anything. We are domestic, homegrown, and that's why we are growing, because India's growth story is solid.
You know, for years and years, the Adani Group faced so many concerns in Australia about your mining project over there, one of the largest in the world, the Carmichael project. You won legal cases over there. You've got the backing of provincial governments, etc., etc. But is that still a core part of your growth plans, the idea to bring back cheap coal from Australia, possibly to countries like India, to help fuel our growth in this country? Because simultaneously you are pursuing fuels which are non-polluting. So I'm just trying to understand how important a part of your plans is your mining activity in Australia.
See, mining, there's mining activity versus fuel. So mining is a very small element of our overall portfolio, about 6 or 7%. So in our portfolio, so it's not a big element of our portfolio. In relation to fuel, there are two elements to this. One is fuel security element for the country. So it is very important for India, because we are growing fast, we are a large economy, to have fuel security that comes from friendly countries like Australia. So one is the strategic fuel security, so that helps. Second is that the coal mine itself is less than 3% for us. So it's not a massive element of our business. Like, for example, one of our green transaction, which is $3.5 billion SoftBank transaction that we just recently completed in Adani Green Energy, that exceeds our capex in the mining business. Just one transaction. So it is more strategic in nature, cleaner fuel, and providing strategic fuel security for our energy needs. And that's critical for growing economy like India, where we are net importer of energy.
All right, Mr. Singh, lots of questions there. You've taken all of them. Thank you very much for being with us at a time when so many queries have been raised. But thank you very much, sir, for sharing those answers with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very welcome.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.